Alright, I started cutting out the pieces already for the Tribbiani Traveler Trio. That's like a tongue twister. So the pages are listed, the page numbers are listed in the pattern that you'll print out depending on which size of the bag that you're making. So I'm going to make the small size bag in the video. So you will have the main panel piece, which will have letters A marked on it. You will match those pieces up with the matching letters, butt the pages together at the two lines, and then tape. And then the other pieces that you'll have are the small bottom panel, the small side panel, and the small bottom panel stabilizer. So, and then I have additional cut list, which I always put with the pattern pieces, so you can cut that out and keep it with the pieces for future uses. So I already cut out the exterior fabric for my bag. I'm going to be using waxed canvas. So you can buy canvas already waxed, or you can wax it yourself. This is my side panel. It's waxed. If you can see, it's stiff. When it gets bent or folded, it marks it. So I waxed it myself. There are several tutorials available online, videos on YouTube. So it's kind of a trial and error to find what method you like to use. I'm trying to get my other pieces and knocking stuff all over the floor. Alright, so here are all my exterior pieces. I cut them out and then I waxed them because it was taking me forever to wax the entire piece of canvas. And let's see. Okay, and then so for the pattern, there will be one piece of fusible woven interfacing for each exterior pattern piece. But if you're using wax canvas as I am, you can't iron anything to that because you'll just melt the wax. So I'm not going to be interfacing the lining or the exterior at all. So you'll just skip one set of the woven interfacing, if that makes sense. So you'll cut half of the amount. Okay. So here are all of my exterior pieces. This bag really doesn't have many pieces. I already cut the exterior main panels out of my lining fabric. And then I was like, oh, I forgot to start the video. So, to cut the fabric, I always fold it in half, right or wrong sides together. It doesn't matter if you have a certain pattern on it that you want placed a certain way. It's helpful to have an exterior showing so that you can get the correct placement. Let's see, is that on the... Okay, so I just fold my fabric, wrong sides together, right sides together, it doesn't matter. Line up the fold mark on the pattern piece with the fold in the fabric, and then I take a rotary cutter and I cut right around it. You can pin this piece to the fabric and cut it out with scissors. You can trace it. See, and then I have one full bottom panel. You can trace it onto the fabric and then flip it over and trace the other half to get your full panel and cut it out with scissors that way. So there's a variety of ways that you can do that. Alright. This fabric is not directional in any sort of way. So I'm going to cut out, I need two side panels. So I'm actually going to fold it in fourths like this. Make sure I get all the wrinkles from underneath. Alright, line up those folded edges. Alright, and then I just trim around the pattern piece, and I'm cutting through all 4 layers, so I'm cutting 2 side panels at the same time. All right. So the only other lining pieces that you need are listed on the additional cut list, which would be the interior zipper pocket, 10 by 7 for the small bag, and I will cut 2 of those. So to cut rectangles, I have a quilting ruler. I'm not sure how they market these, what it's called, but I have one of these rulers from the fabric store. Let's see, I need it to be 10 by 7 and I need 2 of those. So what I do is I'll fold my fabric in half. 10 by 7, half of that is 5. And it's 10 inches wide and 7 inches tall. So I'm going to cut it, since the top is not an even straight line, this edge, I'm going to make it 8 inches tall by 5 inches. I don't even know if that makes sense. And then I'll trim that extra off the top. So I'll just turn my ruler around and then do from this side 7 inches. Alright, and that easy, I have a 10-inch wide by 7-inch piece. So that's how I cut rectangles easier. I don't have a ruler that's big enough to measure out a 10 by 7 rectangle. So I fold when I can. I know some people find it helpful to maybe make a pattern piece on a piece of paper, and that works too. So again, to do 10 by 7, I will do kind of an 8 by 10. And then turn this around and line it up at the 7-inch mark. All right, so I have all of my exterior and lining fabrics cut. The other pieces that you'll need are fusible woven interfacing. This is just Pellon Shape Flex 101, or SF 101. I have black because that's what they had. Black or white doesn't matter. If you're fusing it to a lighter colored fabric, the black can show through, so you'll want white. And then I have fusible fleece, and this is Pellon Thermoleum TP971F. So I'm going to get the rest of these pieces cut out, and then I'll come back to show you how to cut the rectangle out of the fleece where the zipper will go in the lining. So I'll be back for that. Okay, I have all of the fusible fleece and fusible woven interfacing pieces cut out. So now if you look at your main panel pattern piece, there is a rectangle. You will cut this out of the pattern, and you're going to cut it out of one piece of the fusible fleece. So let me grab scissors. Okay, so you don't want to cut this out of any of your fabric, only this fusible fleece piece. And this will just make it easier to install the zipper into the lining to have the fleece cut away. Also, if your sewing machine has difficulty going through thicker layers, you may want to, oh, also my embroidery machine is running in the background, so hopefully it's not too loud. But if your sewing machine has difficulty going through thick layers, you may want to go in and trim off a 1/2 inch around all the edges to keep the fleece out of your seam allowance. I don't mind leaving it in, so I will not be trimming it out. There aren't any seams on this bag, I don't think, that are super thick. So I just cut that box out of my fleece, and now I'm going to go in with my rotary cutter. Carefully, keep your fingers out of the way. And just cut the box out of the fleece. You can also, it doesn't have to be perfect. If you overcut, you'll be ironing it onto something anyway. So just like that. You could also lay your piece out flat, trace half of it, flip the pattern piece over, trace the other half, and then cut it out with scissors. So the last thing that I did not cut out yet is the bottom panel stabilizer. So there's a separate pattern piece for that. Make sure you don't accidentally cut your fabric out of this bottom panel stabilizer. We're going to cut 2 layers. This is, why would I forget the name of it right now? I completely am blanking. I'm going to cut this extra piece off. So oftentimes I'll use Peltex. Let's see, I have Peltex here. This is Decoville. Not Decoville Light, just Decoville. I think the number is 526. Maybe it's listed in the pattern. And then there's Peltex. This is a fusible, one-sided fusible Peltex. So either of these will work. I really like Decoville. It doesn't crease the way you see how the Peltex gets creases in it. This doesn't crease like that. It's just a much nicer looking finished product, I think. So that's what I prefer to use. The choice is really yours. So let's see, we want 2 layers of this just to make the bottom, especially in the bigger ones, just to give the bottom some stability. So I'm going to fold that. I'm going to, Joanne Fabric sells the Decoville in these smaller rolls. I haven't seen it on a bolt in my store, but that ruler's just hopefully holding that part of the fabric, or hold that part of the roll out of the way. So I'm just going to fold that in half. I want this small bottom panel stabilizer piece. Make sure you have the correct piece. And these creases will iron out, so. Alright, and then I'm just going to trim around this. Alright, and we're going to cut out 2 of those. Okay, so now I have everything cut out. I'm going to go ahead and get set up over at my ironing board, and I'll show you how we fuse everything, including the parts that we won't be fusing, such as what is attached to the exterior, since we can't fuse that. So, alright, let me get set up at the ironing board. Okay, hopefully that embroidery machine is not even louder because we're closer to it now. So I'm at my ironing board, and I have my lining fabric here. This is a lining main panel. It's right side down. We are going to iron 1 piece of woven interfacing to each of the lining pieces. And then we're also going to, if your exterior fabric is not wax canvas, mine is wax canvas, I can't iron anything to that. If you're using vinyl, you can't iron to that. If your exterior fabric is anything else, you'll also be fusing 1 layer of woven interfacing to each of the exterior pieces. Since mine is wax canvas, I will not be doing that. So I always spray my woven interfacing with water. Look at your manufacturer's directions, but this way, if it's going to shrink up at all, it shrinks up when you spray it with the water. And then I just fuse that in place. My steam on my iron does not work, it leaks. So one of these days I'll actually order a new iron. So if you have a steam press or a heat press, you can use that for this purpose, which I do, but just not in my videos. So once that is completely fused, you will take a piece of fusible fleece and place that over top. You can then place a ironing cloth over the top of this. I'll just flip it over so that if you iron directly on the fleece, it will melt to your iron, so don't do that. So I just iron it from the fabric side, and you want to use steam, or again, I'll just spritz this with a little water. If you want your bag, this duffel bag is meant to be more of a slouchy bag. If you want it to be something more sturdy or to hold its shape better, you can use fusible, or not fusible. I don't use fusible personally, but you can use a foam interfacing, and you can sew base that to the exterior. Or if you use fusible and you can get it to work without wrinkling, go ahead and you can fuse that to your exterior panels. Again, you may want to cut that out of the seam allowances if your machine doesn't handle the bulk well. So I will do this with each of the lining pieces to fuse the fleece in place. This is the one lining piece that has a rectangle opening. This is where our interior zipper pocket will end up. So just make sure you get all of the edges well. And follow your manufacturer's instructions for fusing the product. The only piece that's exterior that will get any sort of interfacing, this is if you're using wax canvas. Let me always add that, if you're using wax canvas. So this is my bottom panel, and I cannot iron anything to this because it's waxed. So I have my two bottom panel stabilizer pieces. If you're not using a wax canvas, then you would go ahead and iron these one on top of another to your exterior bottom panel. I can't do that, so I'm going to actually place them fusible sides together. And I'm just going to iron them right to each other just to get a nice base for my bag, which I'll show you will then base that to the exterior main panel since it's wax canvas. Any other bag, you will fuse these one on top of another directly to your exterior bottom panel. Just go over them a couple times, make sure they're really stuck together. Okay, and then I have one bottom panel sized woven interfacing. I'm going to center that over the stabilizer, and I'm going to iron that only to the stabilizer. Don't accidentally iron it to your ironing board. You can put a cloth under this. My ironing board is obviously already lived a long life. I'm ready for a new one. I'm going to spray that with a little bit of water, and this will just make sure everything fuses together really well. Okay, if your exterior this is hot. I don't want to set this on there. If your exterior fabric is not wax canvas, you will fuse each of the stabilizer pieces to the exterior main or exterior bottom panel, and then you will fuse the woven interfacing over top of those to hold it all in place. Since I used wax canvas, I cannot fuse to it. I am simply going to place this, all of this fused interfacing and stabilizer over the wrong side of the waxed canvas bottom panel. And now I'm just going to clip this in place, and then I'm going to baste the woven interfacing and the bottom panel together using a 1/4 inch seam allowance, which then will not show in your finished bag, but then it will hold everything together. So then you still have a nice base without having to fuse anything to your wax canvas, since you can't do that. Alright, so that about sums up the cutting and fusing portions. We'll go ahead and get everything ready to start sewing, and that will be the next video. And I will have this basted in place. It should be centered, so I'll probably fix that a little bit where it's off. Yeah, just get everything fused together. All of your interfacing will be fused, and we'll start sewing. And remember, your handles and straps are all cotton webbing. Gosh, I hope I can remember words later. So your straps are all webbing, so you won't have to make any of that. If you choose to make fabric straps, you could post in the group if you need help figuring out how to do that. It just is super quick to use webbing, and I prefer the look of webbing on a duffel bag, so that's why I chose to use that. So anyway, that covers that, and we'll come back with video number 2 and start sewing.